On today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves, I will look at some buy low candidates, both pitchers and hitters, and answer many other questions on today's episode. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and then hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below, as it does help out the show a ton. Whenever you do that, if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving on Thursday. Now getting back into the action here of Locked On Braves, and hopefully the stove is going to heat up for the Atlanta Braves here really, really soon. It is a Friday Mailbag episode, so I got several questions to get to. Not as many as normal. I apologize. I sent the post out a little bit late, but we do have several good questions to answer on today's episode, looking at some buy low candidates, some prospect options at shortstop, and many other questions to answer today. And you can start the NFL season, or I guess the NFL season's been in swing for a while now, but you can get things going with FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I want to again give a big thanks to everybody for a lot of the comments we had yesterday during Thanksgiving. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Many of you sent in some very kind words, and I just want to tell you how thankful I am for you and for this podcast. I wanted to read one comment in particular, and this is not to puff myself up or anything. It's because I hope what this person says is true, because this is what what I've always hoped that this podcast would be. And this comment's from Benjamin Walters, who says, awesome photo, referencing the photo of my kids I posted on social media for Thanksgiving. Benjamin said, I'm sure most of Locked On Country would say we feel like you know us personally. Thanks for making our Braves experience the best it could be. You're good at your job. I truly appreciate it. Those are very kind words. Like I said, I don't want to read this to boost myself up here. But I want to reiterate, my goal with this podcast has always been to make sure everyone has a voice, and to make sure it's not just my podcast. This is your podcast as well. And, hopefully you tune in every day or every so often because you enjoy hearing me, even if my voice isn't always the best to listen to. But hopefully you also like hearing my opinions. There are many great Braves podcasts out there. I don't want to start naming them because I know I'll forget somebody, but there are so many good Braves podcasts out there. So again, whenever you do tune in to Locked On Braves, I truly appreciate it. And I hope that when you do, you feel like you are a part of the podcast with me. And that's always kind of been my goal, to know more of Braves country personally, to hear your thoughts and opinions, even if I think they're awful, and some of them are. But you deserve to have that opinion read, discussed, talked about. And that's what I've always tried to make this podcast be. And to be honest, I've gotten pushback from people at Locked On to not do that. And I understand why, because it probably doesn't work on most podcast platforms, but I think we've made it work here. And so again, I didn't want to read that comment to point the spotlight at myself. I hope it points the spotlight back at you and just tell you how much I appreciate what you do for me here on the podcast, how we've kind of made this thing our own community. And I recognize many of you, even BC, a Dodgers fan that comes in almost every day, is a part of Locked On Braves, the Locked On Braves community here. And I hope that's how you feel about this podcast. And we got some everydayers in here with Jeffrey Humphreys and Doc's Cards as well, Laves. Again, I really do appreciate it. And I hope that's the way many of you feel, that this isn't just me getting on a microphone every day and telling you, this is how I feel, this is how they should do it, this is what's right. All of your opinions matter. This is baseball. This is the Braves. And I hope that's the way you feel when you listen to this podcast, that you feel included, because that is my goal and that is my hope for this podcast. So again, hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for those kind words, Benjamin, and so many others. And again, let's continue to grow this community. Let's make it a place where everybody has a voice to speak about Braves baseball without being belittled or talked down to or anything like that. That is not what I come here to do. I come here to give everybody a voice. Yes, my voice is the most prominent one, but that's what my hope is for this podcast. And that's why I continue to do mailbag episodes like this, where it's not just one specific question that I'm answering on a whole podcast. I'm answering a variety of different questions because I want to read all of your questions and try to answer all of your questions. And after that 5-minute intro, that's what I'm going to do now. First question from Dustin Mounts. Besides Jordan Montgomery, who are your favorite buy low candidates to possibly trade for that would fit the Braves? So the way I put this together, I'm going to throw a lot of names at you really quickly. I did not do a deep dive into a lot of these. We may as the offseason goes on. But what I did was I filtered on FanGraphs by WAR, lowest to highest. And I looked at some players who are coming off tough years that I think are better than that could turn things around. And that's kind of how I put this list together. And I did both pitchers and hitters. I mentioned Merrill Kelly already, a guy coming off a down season. I talked about him a lot on our last podcast. I think he's a somewhat of a buy low candidate, although he's pretty cheap at $7 million already. Luis Castillo was the next one that came to mind. I do think he's in a decline, but I still think he's a really good pitcher. And he's set to make over $24 million the next 3 years, so he is not cheap. But could the Mariners take back some of that money, or could they take on some money in a deal for Luis Castillo? I just don't know what we would have to offer them because they're obviously looking for bats. But Luis Castillo could be somebody that I think the Mariners would move. I do think he's in decline, but it's like going from an ace level pitcher to a number 2, 3 type starter in my mind in Luis Castillo. Edward Cabrera I don't think the Marlins are going to give up on him or ready to give up on him, but he is somebody I've just always been enamored with his stuff. He's never put it together. If he were to become available and the Marlins wanted to part ways with him, again, it's hard to see those two teams making a deal. But again, I'm just throwing names out here at you, and you let me know who sticks out to you. Jesus Luzardo is another one like that. He's had at least a good season, but is coming off a bit of a bad one. I've mentioned Reed Detmers in the past. He had a 6.70 ERA last year, but a 3.86 xFIP. He's better than his results. It's frustrating that he hasn't been able to put it all together. Can the Braves unlock that if the Angels are ready to move on from him? And that's not something that they have to do. But if they're getting to that point, I think he's another, buy low candidate for a team that maybe he just needs a change of scenery. And Reed Detmers. Could say the same about Graham Ashcraft. And look, the Reds need all the pitchers that they can get, and pitching is all we could really offer them in return. But he is another guy that I think I love his stuff. I think he has incredible stuff. He just hasn't been able to put it together. And so he's somebody else that, I think could be a buy low candidate. Chris Paddock. Obviously, Walker Buehler is one we've talked about a lot. He's the most obvious buy low bounce back candidate out there. I think the Braves certainly will be interested in him. I put Charlie Morton on this list, just kind of kidding. Although it wouldn't surprise me if Charlie came back and was with a 3.8 ERA type of guy, high threes ERA type of pitcher. I still think with that curveball, he has enough stuff. And an interesting one for me is Casey Mize. Again, I don't know that we match up with the Tigers, who could use offense and have plenty of pitching. Would they take on a Nacho Alvarez for a Casey Mize? Would you do that? Casey Mize, who I believe has 2 more years of control. Yes, he has. Sorry, I know this. He has 2 more years of control. He's signed already for 2025, and then 2026 would be his last year of arbitration. So cheap in terms of money, a former first-round pick. He's from my neck of the woods, so he's a great person. Could the Braves maybe unlock a little bit something there with a former first-round pick that just hasn't been able to put it all together, and a lot of that is injuries. We talked a little bit about Patrick Sandoval. I'm not a huge believer and him, bouncing back to a degree of being a second or third starting pitcher. But, again, buy low candidate. It's kind of what we're looking at here. I don't think Gavin Williams is in that category yet. And again, I don't know what we would have to offer the Guardians, although they seem to like more of those contact-oriented bats. So maybe Nacho Alvarez would be a good fit for them. And then Taj Bradley of the Rays, again, another person that hasn't put it together yet at the big league level. I don't know if the Rays would be willing to move on for him. But again, I'm just throwing some names out there of guys who I think they're better than how they performed so far. And that's kind of how I'm putting this list together. Not necessarily guys that I think are available, but just guys that I'm looking at that I think they're better than what we've seen to this point. Could you perhaps pounce on that and fix them and get them going? On the hitter side for me, Brian De La Cruz is one that came up. He had a 247 XBA and a 433 X slug last year. You get him out of Miami. I know he went to Pittsburgh too and struggled there. Maybe he's somebody you get really cheap this offseason as a free agent. And I know the original question was talking about trades, but I included some free agents in here as well. But Brian De La Cruz could be interesting. MJ Melendez, the Royals need bats, but I like Melendez, left-handed outfielder, athletic, even for somebody that was a former catcher. Again, don't know that the Royals will be willing to give him up. Adolis Garcia, not sure what the Rangers' plans are for next year. There's rumors that they want to shed some payroll, coming off a little bit of a disappointing season, still has obviously a ton of power, big arm in right field or wherever you put him in the outfield. Joe Adell, might be time for a change of scenery for him. He showed flashes last year. His expected numbers outperformed his actual numbers. Could be a buy low candidate. Bo Bichette is the obvious buy low candidate. He was the only shortstop worse than Orlando Arcia last year, and he's not that bad, and his expected stats far exceed his actual numbers. Michael Toglia of the Rockies have no motivation to move him, but he's somebody that, again, his expected numbers far outperform his actual numbers. He could be a guy that's ready to break out. But Jared Kelenic on this list, his XBA and his X slug were both 10 points higher than his actual. His expected slug was over 20 points higher. So, maybe the Braves already have somebody that you're looking to hopefully bounce back from a somewhat of a cold season. Luis Robert, obviously coming off a bad year with the White Sox. Alec Burleson I put on here. Cards have no motivation to move him. Josh Lowe, I don't think the Rays have motivation to move him either. He can't stay healthy, but still has 4 years of control. Zach McKinstry is somebody that I've mentioned before from the Tigers as a super utility player, but also you get him out of Detroit where his expected batting average was 25 points higher and his expected slug was 33 points higher than his actual. Maybe he becomes everyday regular type of player. George Springer, if the Blue Jays took on money or ate some money in that deal, he's owed 24 plus million the next 2 years. But George Springer could be an interesting, buy low candidate. And then the last one I have on here, and this is the one that really kind of intrigued me a little bit. Lamont Wade Jr. of the Giants. I think you put Mike Yastrzemski on this list as well, but Lamont Wade Jr. expected to make $4.7 million in his last year of arbitration. 31 years old, left-handed hitter, 15% walk rate the last 2 years. So somebody that's going to get on base, not great defensively, not a lot of speed. Also, his hitting metrics, you just go look at his Baseball Savant page, you're going to be surprised because it's all lit up in red. So his hitting metrics, say that he's a solid, if not great hitter, great walk rate, able to get on base. Not sure what we'd give the Giants unless they just, want some more pitching. But he gives an interesting one that I was looking at on this list. So thought I'd mention it. So again, throwing out a lot of names to you there. Let me know what you think. See Doc saying Lawrence Butler. That would be a buy high candidate there, Doc. He's coming off a huge year. But those are some buy low candidates for me. Let me know any of that group that you want or anybody that I missed. Let me know down in the comment section below. All right, next we'll get into more of your questions. We have some others about some buy low candidates as well. We'll answer those questions here next. You shouldn't have to worry when getting tickets for your next big event, and you don't when you use the Gametime app. The Gametime app is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all in prices you can filter right there in the same screen, where you can also get a view from your seat so you know exactly what it's going to look like. You also get the Gametime guarantee. That means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the only ticketing app I even look at now when I'm getting ready to go to a Braves game. I'll start about a week ahead and just see what kind of deals they have, as they always have flash deals going on. And sometimes ticket prices get better right up into Gametime. So download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. You can find that over on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This will be our final podcast of the week, as always, in the offseason, unless some big news happens. We'll be back on Monday night with a live episode, looking at 2 more prospects for the Atlanta Braves and talking about any news happening over the weekend. Maybe we're getting really close to a Soto signing, some news rumors out there, maybe some fake news as well, which is always fun during the offseason. But again, we'll be back on Monday. Question from E Gold. He says, hey, Jake, if you were the GM for a big money team, would you spend $50 million a year for Soto for the next 12 to 13 years? Or would you find more value in spreading that money out among 2 to 3 good players? It's a fun question. It's also a loaded question in many ways. If I were a GM for a big money team, I would just do it all. I'd sign Juan Soto. I'd do what the Mets tried to do a couple years ago. I'd do what the Dodgers are doing now. I'd just buy everyone. I'd sign Shohei Ohtani, and then I'd trade and sign for Tyler Glass. Now I'd sign Blake Snell. I just would do it all. So that's kind of the cop-out question a little bit. I think you have to ask this question in terms of, are there limits to your spending? And if there are limits to my spending, then I'm doing the second option. I'm getting 2 or 3 good players that I'm maybe signing for 20, 25 million a year, because one player is not going to win you a championship. Go see Mike Trout. Go see Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, who played on the same team together. Granted, one of them was always hurt, it seemed like, during that stretch. But 1 or 2 great players does not win you a championship. You have to build an entire roster. In order to sign somebody like Juan Soto for that much money, you have to already have a core in place there. That has to be the final touch on what you've already built in a core team. So again, I think there's layers to that question, but I think what you're trying to ask is, if I'm a GM and I have some sort of spending limit, does it make more sense to go out and do the one big move, or 2 or 3 really, solid moves, which I would still consider big moves, signing anybody for 20 plus million a year. And I would spread it out, because unless you already have that core in place, Juan Soto is not going to do anything for you. But if you're like the Braves, you already have a core in place and Soto could put you over the top, and I'm the GM and money's not an option, then yeah, I'm going to get Juan Soto, because I think he does put the Braves over the top. I think he could put the Braves over the top. So yeah, that's how I answer that question. Again, I think there's some different layers to it, that question as well. 10-Day IL says, some under the radar guys like Peter Lambert and Braxton Garrett, do you think they would be good fits? I don't know the health status of Garrett. He ended the season injured with elbow injury, so that kind of scares me. Obviously, it's a guy that has good stuff when he's been healthy, but I would need to know that he's healthy. Lambert, you get him out of Colorado. He has some good offerings, a good changeup. Maybe there's some upside there. It could be a buy low candidate. I don't know the Rockies' willingness to move him. But I think both those guys, especially in the case of Garrett, who's proven it at this point, could be good. And anytime you can get a pitcher out of Colorado, they can certainly become better. But those aren't 2 guys that I would say are near the top of my list. Dustin Mounds, how do you think the Kikuchi and Snell contracts affect the starting pitcher market? Do you think it hurts or has no real impact on the Braves' chances of landing Eovaldi or a similar type pitcher? So Kikuchi got about $3 million over what MLB Trade Rumors had projected. Snell got more than I thought he would, considering his last offseason. Did the qualifying offer really deter teams that much from signing Blake Snell, who, by the way, went out and had a typical Blake Snell season where he struggles for a while, he misses a bunch of time, and in the end, he still looks like a Cy Young worthy type of pitcher. It's just kind of the headache that comes with Blake Snell. You don't know how many innings you're going to get out of him. He's going to have a rough stretch in there at some point where he looks like one of the worst pitchers in the world, but then eventually he's going to look like one of the best pitchers in the world. And the Dodgers were willing to still take that risk and sign him to what I thought was a very expensive contract. But again, that contract's complicated. It comes with big signing bonus, deferred money, all of that. Just those 2 signings alone, it feels like the price is high for starting pitchers right now. I don't think it's going to impact the Braves' chances on getting someone like an Eovaldi or somebody in that range. I think they're still going to get a 2-3 year deal for anywhere from 18 to 22 million a year. Now, if somebody were to come out and give Nathan Eovaldi more than 22 million a year, which was what he was projected for, then by all means have him. I think 22 million is the very tip top of what I would pay Nathan Eovaldi a year. So again, just to answer your question, I do think the prices have been a little bit high so far from what we've seen, but I don't think it's been so high that it's really going to make, affect what the Braves' plans are going to be. Caden Hurd, with the Dodgers getting Snell, does this mean we need to ramp up our pursuit for high-end free agents like Adames, Teo, and Max? I don't. Again, this is a loaded question to ask. If I'm the GM and money's not an option, then yeah, go sign Teoscar Hernandez, go get Willy Adames, go get Corbin Burns. and give yourself the best chance of taking down the Dodgers. Like, many of you aren't going to believe this. I think the Braves going to beat the Dodgers. Even right now, with what the Dodgers have, it's baseball, and the Braves have a good team and a good roster. Catch up with the Dodgers. That's just never been his type of thing. So I don't think Alex Anthopoulos is going to be reactionary in that way. Dustin Mounts was already answered that one. Chuck McMillan, if we decide to not upgrade shortstop this offseason, will we have more options next offseason? Could Hires get Arcia back to his all-star form of the 2023 first half? I don't think Hires is going to get Arcia back to what he did in the first half of 2023. I think that was just a guy that was having a hot stretch. I don't think that's who Orlando Arcia is. I never have. I think Orlando Arcia is a slightly below average offensive player who had a great first half in 2023 in a year where offense was up. Nothing really take away anything from what the Braves did that year, but offense was up that season. So I don't think Hires is going to be able to fix Arcia and make him an all-star suddenly. As far as what's available next offseason, the top name would be Bo Bichette at this point, unless Bo Bichette just comes out and has another terrible year. But I don't think there's many great options next offseason either. Dustin Mounts, do you think the Jose Devers minor league signing was just a depth move, or do you think the Braves see something more and could fix him? I think it's a depth move. It's a guy that has an option left, has experience at the major league level, and a guy that can play shortstop. So I think it's just a depth move. I don't think it's anything more than that. All right, I know we froze up for a second there, so I'm going to take a quick break, come back, and answer the rest of your questions. Get into the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. They already have some odds coming in for MLB season next year, World Series odds, as well as league winners as well. The Braves have the third best World Series odds and the second best odds to win the National League. And check all that out at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, a couple more questions to get into, and then I'll try to get to some of your questions in the chat as well. So if you have some questions, make sure you start submitting those in there now. Hayden Harris, with no obvious long-term shortstop fix, how about trading for a top shortstop prospect that is blocked at the major league level? What would that kind of deal look like? I assume it depends on what team he comes from. We've talked about this in the past, and I've tried to look for some prospects out there that are blocked. Here's the thing, though. If you have shortstop prospects that are blocked, they're just going to become second or third baseman. That's generally what happens. I mean, most teams just draft shortstops knowing that there's a good chance they're going to move off of shortstop at some point. You see it all the time. So, again, teams that have good shortstop prospects coming up and already have good shortstops, they're just going to move those guys to second or third, assuming they have openings there. And we've talked about this a little bit as well. Jordan Lawler of the Diamondbacks, which I don't know that he's blocked. I think they need to give him a chance and trade Perdomo and others. But, we talked about a little bit with the Orioles, who have, a plethora of infielders over there that they can move one. I don't think it's going to be Jackson Holiday because he was the top prospect in baseball last year. What would the Braves have to give them? They'd have to give them their top pitching prospect. I mean, if you're going to, depending on who it is, but, you'd have to give up one of your better prospects to get another team's really good prospect. They would have to have a need at pitching to obviously match up there. So is it possible? Yes. Would I love to see the Braves try to do that? Yes. Let me know. I mean, submit it in the comment section while I'm trying to get to these live here in the comments later as well. who is that prospect? Who do you see out there that is blocked that makes a lot of sense for the Atlanta Braves? I just don't see many out there that the Braves could go after. Out of the Braves free agents, if you could only bring back 2, who would you pick? He lists AJ Minter. This is from TS Studios. They mentioned AJ Minter, Max Fried, Whit Merrifield, Griffin Canning, Gio Urshela, Ramon Laureano, Huascar Ynoa, and Kevin Biggio. Max is the only one that I would love to have back. Behind him, it would either be AJ Minter or Whit Merrifield. Minter, if his health is okay. If not, then Whit. Laureano, I guess, would be my 4th there. But I think the only guy on there that I really want back is Max Fried. All the other guys I think can be replaced. Now, if AJ Minter is healthy and is AJ Minter, then that's what I would go after, or that's what I would want. But I'm a little worried about AJ Minter. So outside of that, I would love to have Whit back just for his leadership, his versatility, and what he can bring you. But I'm with you, Thrills. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to have a good season next year. I think that hip, is becoming a big problem for him. I know he's gotten it fixed, but I want to see it first for AJ Minter. All right, that was all the questions on today's episode. No real news to speak of right now. It's pretty quiet, obviously, with Thanksgiving holiday, but hopefully things are going to pick up here rather quickly. Doug Killian says Blake Snell and Luis Castillo, who were born 8 days apart, have nearly identical career stats, including WAR, based on 221 starts apiece. Does the Snell contract increase Castillo's trade value? Possibly. That's a good point. Again, that's more so for me because the metrics are pointing for Luis Castillo starting to decline. I don't know you can necessarily say that with Blake Snell. Like I said, he has his rough patch every year. He has his injury every year. But at some point, for the most part, he is just going to go off for 2 or 3 months and you just can't touch him. Luis Castillo has just been a steady workhorse for years now. But it would not be surprising if team, what is it, 22, 24 million a year for Castillo? That's not an unreasonable price, even if there is some decline for Luis Castillo, that he's maybe more of a 2 or 3 type of pitcher going forward. That's still not a terrible price for Luis Castillo. Braves Thrill says, how about trading for Framber Valdez or Luis Castillo? We talked about Castillo. I don't know what the Astros are going to do. And what could you offer the Astros that they need? Let's say they are going to go for it. What could you offer the Astros in return for Framber Valdez? I don't, I like Framber Valdez. I think he's a good pitcher. I just don't think there's a match there with the Braves and the Astros. Jeffrey Humphrey says, what about Sandy Alcantara? Again, I like Sandy. I don't know what to expect from him this year after not having pitched in so long. And I don't know what that deal would look like in division. Well, what would the Marlins need from the Braves in order to make that deal happen? Not necessarily so much that it's in the division, but you're giving up a guy who won a Cy Young for your team. He's, maybe becoming the face of your franchise before all the injuries. And then you just trade that away to a division rival and watch them go win a division and hopefully win a World Series with, the guy who won you a Cy Young and was one of the faces of your franchises. That's hard pill to swallow. But I like Sandy. If there's a deal to be done there, I certainly would be interested. Doc's Cards, how cool would it be trading for Drew Jones? It would be, even though I don't know that I'm a huge believer in Drew Jones, but that would certainly be great. I would love to see that happen, get him over in the Atlanta Braves, following his brother's footstep. Doc's Cards, Corey Seager trade possibilities. That contract is insane. No way, unless the Rangers are eating a ton of money there. I know the Braves aren't going to take that on. All right. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for joining me here today. Laves, Moss Boost, Jeff Barry, Monty 2K. Appreciate you all joining me live here. Others that I've already mentioned, Braves Thrills, Doug Killian, Doc, Jeffrey. Thank you all for joining me here live on today's episode. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Hope you all have a great weekend. Hopefully we get some news. Hopefully the Braves sign somebody big here over the weekend. We got a lot to talk about next week. But that will do it with this episode of Locked on Braves. Thank you again so much for joining. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. And make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked on Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.